Okay, let's talk about materials now. These are going to be an important part of our scene, and so it's important that we get them right and that we get enough detail in there to add to the realism that we want. So one thing that we can do right away, let's close this, and let's just look at some of these purchase material, or purchase models, because generally these have pretty nice materials on them. If you've purchased them from, like, for example, Design Connected, they usually have very high quality professional materials on them. Okay, the one thing this isn't going to have is a lot of distressed material on it. This is going to be a nice, clean, new piece of furniture, so that's what we're going to concentrate on. So if you open the material editor, this is the slate material editor, as opposed to the compact material editor, which you've seen before, of course. Compact mode slate. And this lays it out in what's called a node-based format. If we expand, we can see this is that material for the table, and it's just, if you click on this, it looks like the compact editor over here, but then instead of filling the map slots, we're just dragging to a new map. So let's just break these, and I'll show you how it works. This is just a multi-sub object, so it's got two materials in it. And again, this is for that table. The way you would get that material is by going in the slate editor, and you can just click like that. And it just takes me to there in my slate editor because I've already got it in here. If you didn't have it in there already, it would put it in here. So this is our material, multi-sub object. So you would just drag off of here and create a material, a Vray material, right? And that's what this is up here. So that's your first material. It's just in node form instead of just in the map slots. And then the second material is this one. And then for all your maps, which would in the compact editor look like this over here, which you're used to seeing, you just drag off of each of those slots for the map you want. So you can see the diffuse map and the bump map are the same map actually, and that's one advantage of the slate editor. You can make the reflection map go to there too. You can do whatever you want. So let's look at this material and how it's created. And if you take anything away from this lecture, I want it to be that good materials start with good maps. Okay, in ArcViz, we're not usually doing a lot of procedural stuff where it's being generated by the computer. We're actually using bitmaps, usually photo reference type stuff that is carefully edited to make very nice maps. So this map is going to look like this. It's got a lot of detail, even when you zoom in. Very nice wood grain. That's a very nice texture. It's very evenly lit. There's no shadowing going on or anything like that. Perfect. In the reflect map, this is going to tell us using black and white values where to reflect. So you see this map is taken from this map, but the levels are adjusted and the saturation is adjusted so that only these little grooves are not reflecting because it's kind of dirty in there and there's a lot of that wood stain in there. And so it's not reflecting there, but in these areas it's reflecting, but you'll notice it's not perfectly white. It's kind of grayish, meaning it's not a mirror reflection, but it is quite reflective. Okay, and adding some variation in the reflection, just putting a solid color on there would look bad because there's always variation in reflection. Study the surface of real wood and real objects and you'll see that there's variation in the reflections. Now for the bump. It's going to be based on the same map again. In fact, it looks almost just like the reflection one. So again, those grooves are where the bumps go down and the rest of this is flat. So it's basically polished. Okay, so there you have it. Those are very high quality maps and therefore you just have to kind of plug them in. So let's look at the settings that we use here. Reflection glossiness is at 0.6. If we bring up the preview, make it a little bigger, we can see what that's doing. So notice here, the reflection is not perfect. Where those grooves are, you see less reflection. So that adds a little bit, you can really see it down here. That adds a ton of realism to your scene. So don't use solid colors. For the glossiness, we did use just a solid number. You could actually add even more detail by putting a glossiness map in there. 0.6 is going to look like that for the highlights. 0.9 would look more like a mirror, right? Like this. Okay, so 0.6 is about right for this. The other setting that I adjust frequently is the Fernell Reflections Index of Refraction. So what that does, with that checked, that means Fernell Reflections means it's reflecting more on the edges than it is when you're looking at it straight on. So as it gets closer to the edge, it reflects more. And what I often do is unlock the index of refraction here, and I turn it up. So 1.6 is the default, and you'll see that the overall reflection of the object goes down. If I put it to 5, the overall reflection goes up. So 2 is about right for this object. If you turn it off altogether, then it's going to reflect evenly across the sphere, and it will generally be a lot more reflective and fake looking. So we want it like that. So only when you're looking at it at the very edge does it reflect like that. But if you turn this up, it reflects more in this area as well. This is in the newer versions of V-Ray. There's the microfacet GTR, which I'm not sure if that's default or not, but these are different shading models. Microfacet GTR is the most accurate kind. If I put it on Phong, you'll see that it looks a little bit different, and Blinn will look even different again. I would start with Microfacet GTR because it gives you these really nice highlights that kind of fade out. So there's kind of a solid specular highlight there, and then there's this gradient specular highlight emanating out from it. You can also adjust this highlight here like so. So that makes the highlight come in tighter. That makes it go out loose. So that's almost like the glossiness, right? Okay, so you can adjust those things as well. The only other thing to look at here is the maps. One thing that I often change is the blur. With a nice grain like that, you might even be able to put this to a 0 of blur so that it's just really crisp when it renders. This one was not put to that, but I think it can be if you have a really high quality bitmap. On bump, you'll notice the blur is turned down to 0.3. If I put it to 0 or 0.01, it'll start to look a little bit kind of like it's got artifacts going on maybe. If I put it to 1, it's harder to notice here, but on certain bitmaps that will just kind of spread out the bitmap and make it look totally fake. Like on a wood floor, if you want a crisp bump line for where each joint is, blurring it makes that line a lot less crisp and makes it too wide. So you want to be careful with the blurring on bump maps. But when you turn down the blur, as an example, let's put it at 1 and then turn up our map to 30, which is default. Okay, there you see that blurring and the bump at the default level. It just looks wrong. It looks kind of lumpy, and these grains become too thick or too wide. You want something more crisp. But if you put the blur down, all the way down, and leave it at 30, now it looks really noisy and also bad. So as you turn down the blur on your bump map, you'll also want to turn down its impact. So 5 looks about right, actually, almost perfect. I like the way that looks. So it's much more subtle now, and it looks the way that it should. So careful with the influence that the bump map is going to have, and also with the blur. And I rely heavily on these swatches to get the right levels for those on my materials. That's one of the purchase materials. So that's very nice. And again, it starts with high quality maps. So in the next video, let's work on making our own material for that buffet that we have over there. And let's make our own maps for it and make sure they're high quality like this so we can develop our own custom textures.